Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I am your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Vanderbilt play-by-play man Andrew Allegretta. We will talk about Vanderbilt's loss to Alabama, the Liam Robbins injury, touch on the Arkansas game, and hit some baseball as well at the end. Andrew appears on the guest line that is presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael is a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case for my prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you're in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call at 615-830-9458. Our question and answer session with Andrew is presented by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, call Taylor or Russell. That number 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Now on to our interview with Andrew. Andrew Allegretta joins us. He, of course, the play-by-play voice of the Vanderbilt Commodores. Vanderbilt had an interesting week. It had one of the best halves of basketball in years at Memorial Gymnasium when it beat Arkansas on Saturday afternoon, and then we had last night's game with Alabama, which Vanderbilt fought hard in the first half. Alabama went on a run to end the first half, carry that over into the start of the second half. Vanderbilt made a charge in the final couple minutes, but it was always an uphill battle. Anyway, here we are, a win and a loss to talk about, and really a good atmosphere inside Memorial for both those, it seems. So with my long-winded preamble, welcome to the show, Andrew. Thanks for joining us.
It's good to be here. I'll keep mine briefer.
Well, that wouldn't be hard. But, yeah, let's start here. The injury to Liam Robbins, my goodness. What does it take for this basketball program to get through a year where it doesn't have its best player, one of its best two or three players hurt for an extended stretch? It is an unbelievable spell that predates your tenure here by several years.
No, but I certainly have been able to pick up on it to an extent, and it's heartbreaking. It hurts because you can understand the perspective, possibilities with a healthy roster, right? But this is why I think, and it will always stick with me, a coach told me one time, for everyone that thinks that being a coach is constructing a roster from year to year, that's part of it. But an equal, if not bigger part, is how you manage the changes within your roster throughout the course of the season, be it injuries, departures, so on and so forth, which is it's been difficult. And certainly if you tack on what's going on with the women's program, it's just it's heartbreaking because you can see the talent out there, but it only means so much if a certain number of them are on the floor. So I feel for Coach Stackhouse. I certainly feel for Coach Shea Ralph and everything she's been through. I don't know what it takes, Chris, but I know it certainly is a extra large bummer, to say the least, to watch Liam go out.
That was not the matchup you want if you're Vanderbilt in that spot. I've seen Alabama play a bunch. They are long, lean, and athletic and play hard. They put a lot of big guys out on the perimeter to get after shooters. You just don't get a lot of clean looks even when you do. You've always got the thought, you've got a guy coming at me probably. I might have a clean look now, but in 0.2 of a second, that could change. When you take Robbins out of the equation, it just changes everything for that offense, and then you get that matchup on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult matchup for everybody, right? In a topsy-turvy college basketball landscape this year where, like, North Carolina and Duke and some of the ACC brethren are flipped on its head, and Kentucky's going through what it's going through this season. Alabama arguably could win a national championship this season, and they might have one of, if not the best players in college basketball right now. So, it's a difficult matchup for everybody, and certainly the game changes for the men's basketball program without Robbins, right? It puts pressure, like you were saying, Chris, I think, to underscore it, on all of these guys out on the perimeter to make their shots without the pressure relief valve of the post players. I don't know. I'd be curious your perspective too on the performance against Alabama. It wasn't a win, so we're not happy about it. But again, that's one of the premier teams in college basketball this season, and that's certainly our goal. But they acquitted themselves well, and I don't know. I think that it certainly strikes me in talking with Kevin some today, just in the office. If someone like Lee Dort matures quickly, which he's actually, according to Kevin and talking with some people, matured relatively quickly in regards to him being a freshman. If he continues to mature, hopefully he can manage to soften some of the departure of Liam.
Yeah, my overriding thought on the game last night, when you were writing up a game, I don't know how much people know about the business of journalism and how you do it. Sometimes I'm filing a story for a third party somewhere else in addition to what I do at Vandy Sports, and sometimes they want those as close to the buzzer going off at the end of the game as you can possibly make it. So you just sit there and you've got a lot of it pre-written. You just fill in the dashes with final scores and percentages, and Brandon Miller scored X amount of points and so on. So I'm getting the game story ready, because when it's a 23-point game with 15 minutes left or whatever it was at that point, you kind of have a pretty good feeling of what the game story is, unless something really, really changes, which in the final 2 minutes, there was that possibility it could, but it was always going to be slim. Here's where I'm going with this. My lead for that was Vanderbilt shot X%. And for most of the second half and the end of the first half, that number was in the low to mid 20s. Now, it crept up at the end of the game and ended up at 30.1%. But the point was, the fact that Vanderbilt couldn't hit shots was the story of the game to me, for all the reasons that we've already outlined. And Tyron Lawrence, to me, was the guy that tried to carry them, but it seemed like a lot of times he'd get the ball, he'd go to the bucket, his guy would be on him, and then a couple of bigs would swing over. My takeaway from last night was just, against elite defensive teams, they're going to have a hard time finding points, because I think it seemed to me like, watching last night, Lawrence's name must have been circled on the scouting report as a, hey, when this guy's got the ball, look out, because he can do some damage. You heard Eric Musselman highlight that concern and the warning that he had told his team, hey, look out for this guy to go left, and they couldn't stop him. Well, it felt like Nate Oates had scouted that one out pretty well, because even though Lawrence had 20 points, it took him 16 shots to do. That's a lot that I just gave you there, but my takeaway was that without Robbins, shots were just a lot harder to come by, and that shooting percentage that you saw most of the night was the reason they fell behind by 23.
Yes, and I'm going to tack on one small thing, which is not to diminish the loss, but to point out something that, if the trend continues, I think is a good thing. Talking with Stackhouse on the Commodore Hour back on Monday, I think he pointed out the fact that he has, quite frankly, challenged a lot of these guys to be consistent and steady and intense, regardless of if someone is actually challenging them, right? Like, they rose to the occasion against Arkansas because that got chippy, and they said, I'm going to prove you. And guys like Jordan Wright and Tyron Lawrence stepped up. And Stackhouse said on the show that quite frankly, Stackhouse and Jordan haven't been best buddies as of late. And that's because Stackhouse is pushing Jordan to be a consistent impact player, regardless of whether or not the ball is going in the bucket, and regardless of if someone is quote unquote challenging him. And he said the same thing about Tyron Lawrence. And just looking at Tyron's performances over the past month or so, it's 4 points against Mizzou, it's 5 points against Tennessee, it's 22 against Arkansas, it's 20 against Alabama. If it's starting to click to guys like Tyron and to guys like Jordan, the intensity that is required on a game in, game out basis. And they're not robots, they're humans. So understand that it's difficult to get to that point. But if they're starting to learn what that intensity feels like, that's a buoy, right? So Robbins goes out, you need somebody else to step up. If you see a more consistent performance from Tyron, I like his game. I like Jordan's game too. If those guys are feeding you 15, 20 points on a consistent basis, even 10 to 15, and giving you high energy levels on the defensive end, all of a sudden, again, it doesn't get rid of, but it softens the blow of Liam. So if that trend continues, there's a positive.
Well, the disappointing part of this, you mentioned Jordan Wright. Jordan had that back issue that I think kept him out of a game or two, certainly hobbled in some others. And I remember, goodness, what was it, the Southeastern Louisiana game maybe, right before New Year's. I remember being courtside for the game, and he goes up, I think for an alley-oop that he doesn't connect on, and he comes crashing down to the floor hard. And I'm going, oh boy, because he's had back issues, and that just looked like a nightmare in waiting. He hops up and looks fine, blocks a shot on the other end later. I'm thinking, okay, that's a good sign for them. Jordan Wright as well. Now, I don't think they're the team that played Arkansas in the second half. I think that is like a 99-point-something percentile version of this team in a good way. But it is a little bit a part of who they are. I mean, that they put that on paper, right? And I just remember thinking, okay, that second half of that Arkansas game, when you got everybody healthy, now I don't think they were going to go on a run and go to the NCAA tournament, but it did pique your curiosity a little bit, and it's just a shame now that Robbins won't be part of it because it's not to beat a dead horse, but it's a lot different. What I was getting at is that you finally got Wright healthy, and it was going to be interesting to see where it went.
Agreed, right? And they certainly have. I would agree with you, Chris, that they have put inconsistency on paper. What that means, where that goes, I don't know. It certainly can't be the norm if they're going to, make a run through the SEC tournament, whatever it happens to be. I still am compelled by the pieces on the floor. I think Ezra has a lot to offer. I think Lee Dort has a lot to offer. I really think Tyron Lawrence has a lot to offer when he's in that engaged mode. Miles Studi still needs to be a consistent player. And I know him finding his role beyond the three-point arc has been a work in progress, and he's a much better defender. He's still looking for his secondary offensive weapon. We've seen him attack the glass more, get to the free throw line at times. I'm looking at the Arkansas game, had 8 free throws in that game.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible.
Look, it's, again, back to what Stackhouse is dealing with and what that one coach told me that one time, which I will always remember, is it's how you're able to manage your roster within the course of a season to maximize it. And every time you think you have something just about there, if you're Stackhouse and then Robbins goes out or Wright goes out and then you've got to find it again, it's a difficult proposition. So I've got empathy for them, but I know they hold themselves to an exceedingly high standard. Stackhouse is, he's a competitor now. Just because he's not a player, like that part of Jerry Stackhouse is still very, very much in him. That intense North Carolina basketball player that was, ready to stand toe to toe with anybody is still right there firing in him. So I certainly hope that whatever these curses are, these hexes are, whatever it is, they've minimized themselves, and whatever the puzzle pieces are for the rest of the way, they can figure out how they fit together.
Yeah, a couple games coming up. I feel like they need to get one of these two. Georgia on the road. Mike White has done a tremendous job in Athens in his first year. I think they are, 13-5 now after losing to Kentucky last night. And then, speaking of the Cats,
conference.
Yeah, 3-2 in the league. And then the next one up after that is Kentucky. That's at home next Tuesday, and God only knows what version of the Wildcats we're going to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at the rest of the schedule, right? I mean, Georgia, Kentucky, Texas A&M, Alabama, Ole Miss, Tennessee. I mean, Georgia beat Ole Miss. Tennessee lost to Kentucky. I'm not saying that Vandy should win X games, but hoisting the white flag of surrender certainly is not necessary at this point in the season either, just because Liam goes out. Again, not to minimize it, it's a totally different roster, and it's a significant bummer, XL bummer, that he's not out there. But there's gettable games. 30% from the floor, 20% from three, 6 of 30 something or other. It doesn't take a huge shift, right? If instead of being 6 for 30 something, they're 9 or 10 for 30 something, it's a different ball game. So the margins are awfully small. They just got to start flipping them a little bit.
Yeah, and a little housekeeping note here. I think we reported last night that Robbins' issue was a sprained ankle. I think there was a little bit of loss in translation maybe from the coaching staff to the media relations people, not throwing anybody under the bus here. Sometimes those things happen before games when you got sensitive information and you're trying to pass things along, but we reported it as a sprained ankle. It's actually a sprained foot, which probably in the scheme of things is not as good given that Robbins has had foot issues before. I don't know if they're related to the one he's got now, but just to put a bow on that, it's not a sprained ankle. Apparently, it's a sprained foot.
Yeah, I mean, you would know as much as I do. I get that I work inside the building. I think for folks that, we talk about housekeeping on my end. I'm certainly very much around the men's basketball program, but my attention is often focused on football and baseball.
You got a lot of things to chase, yeah.
Well, I focus on football and baseball because those are the two sports that I'm assigned to on a more primary basis, right? Call every single one of the football and every single one of the baseball games. So I spend a little bit more time with those guys and allow Kevin to be he's assigned to men's basketball to be that guy for that program. I will say this on a quick aside note. I got a question the other day. I was having lunch with some other people, and I feel like throwing it in here just because how we have been assigned is a little confusing, and it's to nobody's fault. And I like the way that we're assigned. It's a good thing the way that we're assigned here at Vanderbilt. It's unique, and it's, I think, great for the program. It's also great for work-life balance for Kevin and myself. I've got all of football for radio. Kev's got all of men's basketball for radio. I've got all of baseball for radio. Kev will take SEC Network Plus games for baseball, and I will take SEC Network Plus games for men's and women's basketball when ESPN doesn't assign the announcers. I know
right.
The TV stuff gets really clunky and confusing on all of that. So ESPN has first right of everything. If they decide that they're going to put X game on X platform, whether it's ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, the network, or just a streaming, they've got first right of everything. And then they tell our production crews what they're going to do. Some games, they will do soup to nuts. They're going to come into our production room. They're going to have a director and a producer. They're going to bring their talent. They're going to handle just about everything with the exception of, running the cameras or running the microphones, which we will then still hire the people for that. Other games, they offload everything, right? The producer is in-house. The play-by-play people are in-house. I only take the hoops games when it's entirely in-house. So last night, it was Courtney Lyle, who's a Nashville native, by the way, and Carolina Tech, because ESPN assigned them to be there. So that has nothing to do with Vanderbilt. And I will throw this in here, just as a quick small aside. This is I'm sure not what people would necessarily want to hear, but so they understand the directive. When I do TV games, I'm directed to be neutral, which is a little weird, right? Like, I'm a Vanderbilt guy and I want Vanderbilt to win, but it's
an ESPN production. Yeah,
it's an ESPN production, and the thought process is that it goes out to both fan bases, whether that's a Vanderbilt fan base or a Southeastern Louisiana fan base or a Mississippi State fan base. When I was doing the women's game, it's going out to both fan bases. So we are directed, me as an announcer, and then take, Doug or Dean, who's in our SEC network production room as producers. We are directed to do a neutral show. When I'm on the radio, I can be as much of a homer as I want to be. And I tend to try to lean that way. I mean, trust me, I want Vanderbilt to win for a myriad of different reasons. But just as a point of like housekeeping, since you brought it up and it jogged my memory, it's a different assignment when I'm on TV versus when I'm on radio, and who is calling the shots. Vanderbilt calls the shots and Learfield calls the shots through and through on radio. So we can essentially do what we want on the radio side of things. On TV, that is an ESPN/SEC network production, and they ask for a different approach to it.
I bet Dean is just really hard to work for, isn't he?
Dean's one of the nicest guys on the planet, and this
that was a joke for people.
Baseball.
Yeah.
He's one of the nicest guys. Kevin and Dean could go toe to toe. Kevin Ingram and Dean in our SEC network production room could go toe to toe for nicest people on the planet.
Yeah, I've known Dean for years. We're always, those guys are always ones shooting press conferences and stuff for the network or for whatever Vanderbilt puts out. And unfailingly, I'll get my camera in their line of sight and watching them ask me in the nicest possible way to move it, like a foot to the left is always a fun exercise. I should do it every time just to see at some point if they snap and they're rude, but I don't think that's in Dean.
No, I've seen him be mildly flustered.
Yeah.
But people have seen me be mildly flustered, so it's it's in all of us. I heard you got mildly flustered when Dansby Swanson signed with the Cubs.
Oh.
So the mildly flustered thing is in everybody.
I thought we were friends, man. You had to bring that up. Anyway, speaking of baseball, the rankings are coming out. D1 is probably the one I respect the most. Came out this week, and Vanderbilt is 10th, which places Vanderbilt, I believe, 7th in the SEC, which tells you a lot about the kind of season it is going to be. And my goodness, they got some other teams on the schedule too that are in those rankings that are not SEC teams too. I mean, that schedule this year, I think this will be the most exciting and fun schedule they have ever played, because there just aren't a lot of, they have those series. It seems like they got one or two of them every year where they bring a team in from the Northeast and the composite score of the weekend is 40-2 and you don't learn anything. There are none of those moments this year, or I shouldn't say none, but I think those moments will be few and far between.
Schedule's a lot of fun. I will say, I was going through it. I don't have the exact, maybe I can dig it up while I'm talking here. Vanderbilt in the SEC, not that Tim Corbin backs down from a challenge. He sure doesn't. Having said that, they are missing LSU, which immediately takes off the table some of the best pro prospects in the country. Vanderbilt's got a couple, but LSU's got a bucket load of them. That's why they're number one. My point is, and it's more than just LSU. I think they miss Auburn as well, and I'm going to forget the third. They're missing 10 of D1 baseball's top 100 draft prospects. The schedule's competitive and fun, but in the SEC, it's still really good. It's still really challenging. They still have Arkansas. They still have Tennessee. I'm not saying by any stretch that it's easy. They still have Ole Miss and Mississippi State. It is not easy. That would be a ridiculous assertion. I'm just saying some of the people that can clobber you upside the head, and we watched Dylan Cruz break our soul for 3 consecutive days, we don't have to deal with this year. And we don't have to deal with Paul Skeens, that major transfer from our Air Force to LSU. We don't have to deal with Tommy Tanks at LSU. We don't have to deal with Jacob Gonzalez. People remember him from Auburn last year, throwing like 92 with a little sink, and he just needled us to
Shoved.
death. We're missing. Yeah, but it wasn't with 99 or 100. It was 92 and some sink on it, and he just pinpoint and just clobbered us on a Sunday down on the plains. So we're missing some of those guys, which the schedule's not easy. It's not easy. It just sets up in a way that if this team finds its identity, I think it can position itself certainly to host a regional once again and kind of once again fight for a top 8 national seed. I don't know that that's going to happen. I look at the schedule, I look at our roster, and I think that if this team finds its identity sooner rather than later, and like everything else, people stay healthy and so on and so forth, it can be right there in the mix for a top 8 national seed. If there's ifs, but there's ifs for everybody.
16 and 14, 17 and 13 might get you a national seed this year with that schedule. Andrew, I hate to do this. I've got a hard out to get to another call in about 2 minutes. So with that, briefly, if you guys want to advertise anything about the broadcast, anything coming up with your podcast or the site, the floor is yours to do that as we end today.
No, I'm seeing how quickly I can come up with that stat and see if I can do it before you're hard out. I think it was 10 of the top 100 because I wrote it down. Vanderbilt does
at
not
LSU.
Face, here we go. Let's see if I. That Vanderbilt does not face this season. Again, not that Corbin backs down from a challenge. I'm just putting some perspective on it. LSU, Dylan Cruz, number 1. Paul Skeens, LSU, number 10. LSU, Grant Taylor, number 15. Texas A&M, Nathan Detmer, who popped us in the teeth, number 25. Joseph Gonzalez, number 28 out of Auburn. Cole Foster, number 40 out of Auburn. LSU, Ty Floyd. LSU, Trey Morgan. LSU, Christian Little. Texas A&M, Jack Moss. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 of D1 Baseball's top 100 draft-eligible prospects Vanderbilt does not face this year.
And the next podcast, maybe we can go through who Vanderbilt does face because it's still a formidable list.
It's still good. It's still good.
Yeah,
I'm just
it's still half the top 25.
If we don't have to throw a fastball to Dylan Cruz, I don't want to throw a fastball to Dylan Cruz.
Right. Sam, counting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, but that's everybody, man. That's everybody.
10 of the top 25 they face at some point. That's my quick count. Could be off. No, 11. Alabama's in there too. Andrew, hey, thanks a bunch. It is. We will catch you next. Well, I guess we'll catch you in 2 weeks. We'll catch Kevin next week. But thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Sounds like a plan, Chris.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrislee70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.